Hello, and welcome back to the tavern. This is Gatekeepers. In this episode, we're discussing the importance of setting. What is the importance of a setting? Is it something that is just backdrop and there for the PCs to observe? Or does it have additional meaning, or does it support additional problems that the PCs might have to reconcile? These things and more we're going to explore tonight. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to this channel and the channels linked in the video description below. If you enjoy our content tonight, please make sure to hit that like button, as it helps the channel know if we're doing well, especially on certain topics. If you don't like our content, feel free to hit the dislike button. You're not going to hurt my feelings, and it's going to give me valuable information. Without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Hello, my name's Jaide, and this is my Tabletop Tavern. Joining me tonight is MarHawkman. Welcome.
Good evening.
Shadow of Shadow and Sun.
Howdy, folks.
And Conall the Cigar DM. Hello.
Hey, how's everybody?
All right. So, we got some people in the chat. So, let's see here. Al's saying never split the episodes. It's just like a party, never split it. Or unless you're a game master, then you want to split the party. And then Six Nations, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this has the potential of being a really big topic. Because there are several hello crafting. There are several nuances or subtopics to the importance of a setting. You've got the campaign. You've got when the setting itself takes center stage. How much does player agency come into effect, if any, to a setting? And not to mention, if your players are really, have read the lore of a specific setting, they can get really immersed into the setting itself and really take hold of what's going on and try to, figure out all the ins and outs and the nuances therein. So, again, this and more. So, first things first, how's everyone doing tonight?
Fantastic.
I'm good.
Including you out there in chat.
I think my icon for tonight basically answers that question for you.
Okay.
They're philosophical questions. Oh well.
Hey, Trooper, how you doing? All right. So, thank you, chat, for showing up tonight. I do appreciate your participation in this. Hopefully, everything out there is set up. I did remove the chat icons or whatever they are, the live reactions. I know that that has been a complaint on several other episodes in the past, so made sure to do that. So, first things first, let's get into the campaign side of a setting. And this, and Conall, I know this is one of your favorite aspects of it. Do you prefer to adapt a published setting to your desires, or do you create your own campaign settings?
I would like to say that no, you're wrong. I'm a master of making my own universe. I'm the Prince Adams of the RPG. No, I'm not He-Man, and I am not the DM for you when it comes to that. I like using other people's stuff because if I understand where they're going, I can latch onto it. If I can latch onto it, I can run it. If I can run it, that makes everybody else happy. So there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with the concept of making your own stuff. I recommend everybody at least give it a roll. I try to do it on Gatekeepers. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if I know where the setting is supposed to go, and if I know who all the players outside the table are, I can run it to its fullest and make sure I have full seats every week because really that's the goal at the end of the week is to have full seats.
Fair enough.
Freaking hell.
So Shadow, you've got something to add on to that, I take it.
No, I just Forgotten Realms should be re-forgotten. I've never read a single page. Sorry about that, guys. The dog's being a dog. The only Forgotten Realms I ever read was the hardcover book for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I did not like what I saw there, so I never went and read them. I do own the comic books, and maybe one of these days when I'm reorganizing things and I come across them, I might give them a look-see, but I really don't know anything about Forgotten Realms. So I know it's very popular. I know a lot of people like it. Just I just one of those things I never got around to getting into.
Okay. Well, I mean, what about you? Do you prefer published settings at all of any kind, or do you prefer your own?
The things that I like that I would want to run would be things like John Carter or Amber, which I have run, but I never feel I can do them quite the justice that these masters, these professional writers did in creating their own worlds. And for me, you guys already know I like creating my own worlds, my own settings. I that way I am the master. I'm always right, and I am a bona fide control freak. So it fits my nature just fine. And I want to as a DM, that's what we do. We either create situations and plot hooks or railroads. We create worlds and we create NPCs. And I can do all of those things, but I really enjoy making the worlds. That's like my favorite thing. I make a world and let them go play in it, and find something about it that they love, that they can really get attached to, that in a way is more intimate and more personal than going in and playing in Tolkien's world or Forgotten Realms or somebody else's world, because it's not going. They're all going to have a completely different experience than everybody else, and there's going to be contradictions and things that people say, oh, that's not right, it shouldn't be like this or it shouldn't be like that. Well, with my game worlds, that's never going to be said.
Okay. And lastly, Mar, do you play in published settings, or do you prefer to make your own setting and your own rules for your campaign?
Well, that's an interesting one, because realistically, I have only on one occasion actually made my own original fictional setting. And I've never actually used that in a TTRPG. The way I thought it out, you could actually do a relatively simple version of using the old AD&D rules, adapt the rules using Hyperborea, for example, and play in it. But the only thing that actually makes it different from a traditional swords and sorcery kind of setting is the background story that I put into it. And that's probably the entire reason why I never actually used it for a TTRPG, is I'm just not playing that story. So
Yeah. Just let me know if you get superpowers. We'll start. Okay.
Well, I already have
some. Doom. Yeah. Okay.
What do I need to join?
So, okay. So as far as me, I don't like to run specific settings or published settings, or someone else's, setting. Mostly, it's the reading aspect to me. I get bored with physically reading very quickly. And I know I'm a huge advocate of going to your local library, picking up a book, and reading the stories there. You can draw a lot from literature to dream up your own games, to dream up your own worlds. But when it comes to me, like, reading has always been one of those things that I've struggled with. I don't have the attention span to just sit there and focus in on reading. Or if I do, when I do finally focus in on reading and finally get in the zone, suddenly it's 15, 16 hours later, and people have been trying to get a hold of me all damn day, and I didn't even notice. I'm one of those kind of types that, once I'm in something, I'm in it, and there's no breaking me away from it. But I've tried to run Faerun, I've tried to run Eberron. I tried running Iron Kingdoms, and as much as I do like Iron Kingdoms, it's one of those that there is so much going on in the world, and I'm like, I don't have the time to dedicate to learning 80 years of lore to understand all the nuances of the situation right now. I just want to run a game, and I'm being asked to run this. So I said it, I advanced the clock 20 years into the future because then I don't have to really worry about much. Or I set the clock backwards to a time before most of that, all the really awful stuff starts taking off. And then I've got, bullet points of, okay, by this year, something happens, this awful thing happens, and the PCs need to react to that. Is kind of what I've got going on. But again, I prefer to make my own world. I prefer to make my own setting. Like I've been in the process of writing a Bronze Age setting for my world for probably the better part of 8 years. I'm one of those game masters that I will sit there and write a setting for my world and never play the damn thing. I can't tell you why. That's kind of what I do. I tailspin into it, and I can never pull out of the tailspin. So don't be like me on that aspect. If you got an idea for a campaign setting, write it out, get it done, get it out there.
I've been in enough of your campaigns, and I've known you for a little while, I guess one would say, if not longer than that. I think the upside of making your own world, your own campaign, is like Shadow said. What I said goes. I am God incarnate. If I don't want the zombie to be in the western field, now it's in the right side of the field, whatever. But as you just said, making your own world, making your own campaign, you can get lost, not so much lost in the weeds, but lost. And so you don't end up playing it. So my question is it beneficial for you to work on your own on the side and still run something? Running something, there's no reason to stop sharpening the knife. The moment you stop running, it start to get dull in certain areas. So the benefit of running somebody else's work is you still get to sharpen your blade.
Fair enough. I can see the point of like honing a, as you said, the analogy of honing a blade, while doing like, multitasking. I'm actually pretty close. I feel like I'm close. I need to work out my different tribes of people, kind of like the whole like orcs, elves, gnomes, but in this case, there's just one people, and it's different tribes in their values. That's the last thing I think I have to work out.
And cultures. Cultures.
Yep. Yeah, basically the cultures. Yeah, tribes and cultures. But yeah. So anyway, and I guess the next natural question for this is
I did have one thing I wanted to
sure.
clarify with this. The difference between making up an entire fictional setting versus, shall we say, creating a niche in an existing IP. Like, for example, Star Trek. I have never played a Star Trek Adventures game where we actually tried to directly copy anything from the TV show. So you have your own cast and crew doing things that are completely different from what anyone in the TV show actually did.
Fair enough.
So
Man, I deserve to be roasted in the comments for my Bronze Age.
It's the Star Trek setting, but you're not actually playing the TV show in a TTRPG.
Sure.
Well, yeah, it's a pretty lush environment to work with. There's plenty of things to do that will never take you anywhere near any of the pre-existing stories. So why not?
I mean, well, but that was what I was wanting to clarify here is the difference between making up a setting whole cloth and just going off to the side in an existing setting where the main story of that setting just doesn't happen.
I mean, you could in Star Trek, depends on what generation, what generation of the storytelling you want to do. You can do the wars with the Klingons. You can do the Dominion War. I mean, those wars for storylines were all encompassing in this in the Federation. You don't have to run into Picard, Kirk, Cisco. I can't think of the Voyager captain, but she was busy somewhere else.
Janeway.
Janeway. I mean,
she got promoted to an admiral to keep her out of trouble.
Right.
You know, it's funny. I never watched a single episode, but yet I still know that, and I'm not a Star Trek fan. But
That's because it was in a movie.
I instantly hated her the second I saw her. I'm like, yep, nope, done, out.
She wasn't bad. She's not my captain, but you know, she wasn't. It wasn't bad.
It wasn't easy on the eyes. I'll tell you that much.
So the funny thing with that particular comment is that she's actually their second choice for playing Janeway, and the first choice attempted to film an episode and just like couldn't film an entire episode, so they just switched to their second choice.
Picard was the third.
Getting back onto the rails of tonight, you know, you've already kind of hit on something, and that is the importance of, or the impact rather, of the overall tone and atmosphere of a campaign. Like, for example, you've already kind of hit on that with Star Trek. Like, Star Trek has this huge universe. It's different generations, different eras, different captains, and on all the things that are going on in the universe. And some of that, does that actually have any impact on what the players experience given specific timelines, or does it not bear out on them? Mara, I'll start with you on this one. How does the setting impact the overall tone and atmosphere of the game or the campaign?
Well, okay, I'll use a specific example from that fictional setting that I was talking about earlier that I personally created because of the fact that this particular setting has very specific tonal differences from what you have from a traditional swords and sorcery setting. Like, there's this city known simply as Ree, where, okay, wood elves and humans live there now. However, the city has these underground catacombs that no one really knows how far they go, because the people who live there aren't the same culture that built the city in the first place. And they have no idea why zombie goblins keep shambling out of those catacombs, because they don't know where the catacombs go.
Okay.
Because of the fact that this is a world where it has had catastrophic wars on a large scale in the past that drastically shifted cultural boundaries and the relative power of the various nations in the world. And well, that's the entire reason why the people don't know where those catacombs go, is because they were built by goblins.
Okay.
And the goblins who built them and had maps of where they went and all of that knowledge are all dead.
Or undead.
So how does that impact the overall tone or atmosphere of the game then?
Well, because the fact that it means that there's a lot of like survival horror aspects in places you wouldn't normally expect them in a TTRPG. Like, like that's like the sewers and stuff underneath the city. And you just have random wandering undead in there for reasons no one understands. And there's several places that are just blasted ruins where there used to be a kingdom there. Like the village of Bromford used to be part of the kingdom Bromford. It's just that in a war, a dragon roasted the rest of the kingdom.
Okay. I think I've got additional questions. They might relate to other subtopics, so I'll keep that in mind. Shadow, what about you? How does the setting impact the overall atmosphere or tone of an ongoing campaign?
In every way possible. If especially if you're outdoors, um, Mother Nature wants to kill you every second you're there, and you want to create drama and excitement, etc. Just remember that and have it happen. The the average character, or at least the average player, has very little experience in dealing with the great outdoors on a regular basis. So, remind them of why the townsfolk never go out into the woods, never go, far from their home, because it's safe in the town. And then when you're running the town or the village or the city, show them that dark underbelly, what it's like at night, why the villagers lock their doors, why they don't go down this alley at night, why they don't go even to this part of town unless they're really familiar with it. The maze from Sanctuary, or your typical slum areas, your ghettos, those things like that. More often than not, the players end up going to the palace and the nicer parts of town. Will give them a reason to you know have to go into these seedier parts of town and show them that everything that they thought was just a facade. It's not what's really keeping the city or the town alive. It's all the hardworking people at the bottom, and accidentally stumble into their area. You know you're probably going to have an interesting time, to say the least. There's all kinds of opportunities for chases and escapes, and potential muggings, and interesting NPCs. Most of us have played the snooty noble and the king and the queen and things like that. But in the seedier parts of town, you get to run the guy with the scar across his face. Why does he have a scar across his face? Well, because that's where he grew up. It's bound to happen. The interesting guy standing by the lamppost, at 3 o'clock in the morning. All kinds of interesting NPCs that you can, you know, introduce them to, and the sights and the smells that are not all perfumed and pleasant. You can, like Bruce Lombardo, he's a big fan of scents, and he loves bringing up, you know, things to the imagination. He always reminded me of Hawkeye from that one episode of MASH where they're trying to gross each other out with smells, with trying to get each other to remember various smells. Practice using some of those skills, the sights, the sounds, the smells of your setting.
Yeah. So Connell, as for you, I know you like to run a lot of established settings. How much of an impact on the campaign do you put, or rather, how much importance do you put on the overall tone or atmosphere of a you know established setting?
Well, it really depends on what I'm playing. I mean, I know that's a cheesy answer, but that really is, the answer just depends on what I'm running. If I'm a hypothetical, let's say I'm running Dresden Files. Is
Sure.
it going to be 2000 plus the year 2000 something, 2013 Dresden Files?
Speak of the
No.
devil.
It's going to be Dresden. Dresden's not going to be there. It's going to be maybe 2, 3, 400 years in the past, maybe medieval era Dresden file campaign. What goes on in Chicago during his time period will affect, if I'm running a modern game, will affect the world, but they will never meet him. They won't ever go to Chicago. They might be in New Mexico or Louisiana or somewhere else. So, yes, the two kind of affect each other, but not really. I mean, the war with the vampires, that's a thing. Whatever, that's going to be the thing. The Titan's going to affect New Mexico and New Orleans, but are the players going to be there with the Titan? No, no, they're not. Um, if I'm running Forgotten Realms. I'm going to do my own story of Forgotten Realms. They're never going to meet some of the main player that everybody knows about. They might meet King, the Dwarf King, in his mind because of a mission, but they're never going to meet 90% of the well-established characters, because at the end of the day, yes, this is print out hamburger McDonald's RPG. Welcome to McDonald's. What do you want on your burger? RPG. That's really what Forgotten Realm is. Doesn't mean it has to be a bad experience. There's enough there on the platter. You can make something decent out of it and not have to deal with anything you don't want to deal with. They found the lost mine. I mean, you and me have both been in games with, let's say, Scott, who has used, Forgotten Realm, maybe not the realm Forgotten Realm, but used some of the materials in there, and made his own thing.
Yeah. I know Scott has borrowed from several other settings, and Scott, I know you're out there in the chat. Hello. And he does it masterfully, so because he'll read a book and be like, yeah, I like this aspect of the book, but I don't like that aspect of the book, so I'm just gonna pull what I want. And there's nothing wrong with doing that either. Like if a certain go for it.
At the end of the day,
No,
these campaigns are tools for your toolbox. You use what you want. Don't use what you don't want. It's on you as a DM to provide quality campaign settings. And if you have to borrow from somebody else, guess what? They borrow from somebody else too. Everybody, all the great ones steal from somebody else. At least that's what I've been told.
It's called being inspired.
Yep. Well, that also reminds me of another thing, though, is that, like I alluded to earlier, is that if you do make up your own thing that's technically a unique original setting, you're going to have to explain it to people using analogies. So, yeah.
There's nothing.
Yes, I agree. I agree with Al.
Wait, am I reading this?
I would also use Forgotten Realms if I didn't have to, have or use the 60,000 plus pages of lore.
Okay, I got a question. If we're gonna go for, I know lore is part of the question, but here we go. We want to do a campaign that's loosely based off the War of Roses. King Henry VIII. I am. Right. There's over 1,000 books. Over 1,000 books on that war from every other angle. But you want to run a campaign from that point of view. Aren't you going to read your history? Aren't you going to look into it? Yeah, Forgotten Realm has 6,000 pages of lore. Damn near everything else does as well. We just pick and choose what we want to use.
I mean, that's kind of the same for me and Warhammer 40K. I can't get into the lore. There's so much of it. I don't have the time or the inclination to read through all of the lore for 40K. Can I play a game in 40K? Yeah, I could probably play in 40K. I don't think I could run anything in 40K because I just don't have the understanding of the war of the universe as a whole.
As someone who used to read 40K novels, one thing that I feel is very important to remember is that the lore in 40K is actually somewhat flexible. They've told and retold things over the years in several different ways that are mutually incompatible. And you kind of have to pick and choose which aspects of the lore you want to use. And also, another thing that's very important in the 40K setting is when in the official timeline your story is taking place, because there are certain key pivotal events where telling a story before this is fundamentally different than telling a story after this. Like before or after Horus Heresy. Because prior to the Horus Heresy, the Emperor was actually a very active individual. After that, he was a recluse.
That kind of drives to the point. Like, I don't know enough about the game world to be able to run it at given points because I haven't spent the time.
That's one of the great things about 40K, I guess, is that it isn't just one world. You can literally, look at some images and create an adventure off on some far-flung planet that just vaguely has ties to the Imperium, and do your own thing. You know,
That's a very good point. One of the novels that I read was actually just a handful of Imperial troops on this planet on the backside of no one actually knows where, dealing with chaos cultists and trying their best to stem the tide of chaos while being trapped by a curse from one of the daemons.
Hmm.
a couple of quick
as
things,
far
if
as
you don't mind.
okay, go ahead.
Real quick, guys, I just did my gods, my pantheons of my worlds. Okay, 2 pages, and the rest is all up here. I'm going to get it down on paper, but just writing down the basic notes. And Mac will attest to it. He's in one of my worlds right now, and you don't need to know the actual legends and stories. You could literally let your players make their own up and say, you know, I heard this story, and help you create as you run your game. And Elle said something about every craft world has its lore, right? And it can be your lore. You don't have to go read, you just create, and you create it as you go along. If players aren't asking, they're not caring, you know, or they don't need to know or don't want to know right now. You can come up with it later, and your best lore is going to be stuff that you come up with on the fly. If they ask, make some shit up. Act like you own it. You know,
Also,
yeah, it's always been that way. We've
what-
always, you know, worshipped so and so, and on this day we do that, and you know, whatever.
One key
Right?
thing to
Right, Mac?
remember here, though, is scale of lore. If your story is taking place entirely in a city, you don't need to worry about the lore of the Underdark because you're not in the Underdark.
If they don't ask, they don't
Sure.
care.
I don't know if I agree with that. They don't care. It just might not. I don't know if care would be the word I'd use.
Well, they're not interested.
They don't need to know in order to play the story.
Well, we'll get it. We'll dive a little deeper into lore in a moment. And I'll go ahead and make that the second subheading that we're going to get into.
Sorry.
But as far as setting having an impact on the world or the atmosphere and the tone of the campaign, the way I have approached it in the past is, my campaign worlds are typically at war. There's always some kind of greater conflict going on in the game world. And Conall has experienced this. I think Scott has also experienced this. I think once or twice in my game worlds. The overall arcing thing that's going on in the background is very militaristic, very very warlike, and the war is creeping closer and closer to home for the player characters. So the characters should naturally want to get involved to stop the war's approach onto their homeland. That's the kind of the theme that's I'm building towards, is this war will eventually catch all into it, unless something is done. And the atmosphere that makes is a very grim atmosphere, especially the closer you get to the front line. Food gets more expensive, clothing and tools get more expensive. Weapons might become a little cheaper, depending on, for like sub-tier or sub-grade weapons. But, the closer you get to the front lines, the harder life gets. The further away from the front lines, the easier things might get. But food and whatnot is still going to go up all the time. The cost of living goes up because the nation has been at war too long, and they need to figure out a way to recover their finances. Then you get the political corruption aspects of it, which has an entirely different tone, or sets an entirely different tone or atmosphere for the game. Where the party is, instead of trying to figure out how to clean up the war and stop the ever advancing machine towards them, they're like, okay, let's clean up the political corruption. Let's start there and work our way up the food chain. To save our country, to save our people, to save what we have left. and then we can figure out the war. I've had groups go multiple different directions with that. And as far as the Bronze Age setting that I'm writing, it's not going to be as much a world at war. It's going to be a world that is open to the players, allowing them to explore and find things and make things. The tools, sure, they're bronze tools or stone tools, because stone tools sometimes work just as well or better than the bronze tools, and they're cheaper. But you're going to have a lot of the mythic monsters like the Hydra, the Nemean lion, things of myth and legend that are going to be existing in the world. And players are going to have to figure out how to navigate those mythical beasts in hopes and hope to God they never come across some of the more awful ones. Or if they do, then there's not going to be a let's stand here and fight it and group up till it dies. It's going to be a we don't want to be anywhere near this country at this time, because that country is now going to be gone because that's a mythical Hydra. We're not going to screw with that. So as far as like the impact of the setting on atmosphere or tone, there's a lot you can do based on what your setting's core is, like whatever the setting has at its root. And it should impact the players in a variety of ways. It should impact them either in the pocketbook. It should impact them in what there is available to go and do or see, who there is to be able to talk to, like what kind of power curve or power structures in the world. Those are all things that would be affected by the setting itself. So let's get into lore now. Elle had a question earlier, and that is the setting causing the impact, or is it the genre? Both. I would say both to this. The setting can well, I would say it's both. The setting has an impact, but so does the genre. So I could be in my war setting, my world at war setting, but I can overlay a horror genre onto it. The after the battle has concluded at Stone Ridge, the recently dead soldiers start to rise again and pick up their weapons to fight again. This is a horror themed genre over the top of my war setting, where now not only did you just slay all the soldiers on the battlefield, for the opposing side, now they're getting up, and even your soldiers who died are getting up to fight you again and again and again. There is no end to the fighting. That would be, to me, a horror genre overlaid onto my setting. Let's see here. I'm going to go up.
Nice, Al.
Sorry, there's a lot of chat, and when I'm talking, I don't always get to it.
Ravenloft and Dark Sun, that's the setting informs on everything. Everything is because of that particular world. I really like those kinds of extremes. I'm running a water world right now, and it does so much of the work for you. Imagine running a game on Hoth. It's going to dictate so many things. Even the culture is going to be the way it is because of such a harsh, brutal environment. The same thing with Mars in the John Carter stories. Everything is the way it is because of the way Mars is. You can't survive unless you do these things, and these things then branch out, and eventually everybody does the same things because it works, and you don't die when you do these things. You try to do other things and you die. Ravenloft is the same way. You don't go out at night. Period. You just don't. You see what I'm saying? And I really like using those uni or singular biomes, or at least vast swaths of a particular geographical feature, and it'll do a lot of the work for you.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump. Oh, go ahead.
The night is dark and full of terrors.
Mm,
A
yes.
popular line from the game.
I'm sure Jade is. You've met Brian from World War II before, haven't you?
Yeah, briefly.
Okay.
I think just
He's a
once,
great guy.
though.
He's a great guy.
And
Well,
if you need any help with a war campaign or war setting, just tell him I sent you.
oh yes, high or low magic or tech. You're right. That does impact that is a part of the setting, and it does impact how the game is played, or at least what the character's options are. You are absolutely correct there, L. In my World at War setting, I'm always setting it around like World War I, World War II era weaponry. And I've not actually played or read Weird World War II. I've been meaning to, I just haven't done it. But no, so my tech level is like steampunk. It's slightly more advanced than steampunk. You've got the steam engines, you've got some automated weapons, or some fully automatic weapons, or even semi-automatic weapons.
Have you introduced petroleum products yet?
Yes, actually I have. There are vehicles that run on petroleum, or a mix of like a magitech where it's kind of like a magic powered engine, but it still uses some kind of petroleum or explosive based petrol or fuel to be able to create locomotion.
Chronicles lore, just for some more visual ideas. I can hook you up with some stuff for that. Because it's what's called diesel. It's what's called diesel punk, which is the next step after steam, and they still manage to get the equivalent of simple computers and some other things that you wouldn't expect because of innovation and steam tech, steampunk. That can only go so far before you are smack dab in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, and that's going to require a lot of grease and oil, and you might as well kind of blur the lines between the two as soon as you can. The idea of having to use wood and coal always to produce steam, they're going to find out real quick that there's a better way.
Well, the setting I wrote my own lore for actually has a form of magitech, where like things like enchanted armor are actually very common. They're expensive, but they're common. And people have found ways of making enchantments to do things that you'll often see in sci-fi settings, like having a doorway in your courtyard that goes to somewhere else.
Fair enough. Like my Bronze Age setting is going to be extremely high magic. Whereas my World at War setting is it has magic, but people rely on firearms more so than magic, and the first person they always aim at is anyone who's casting magic. Like that's the first person shot at every single time because of how much devastation they can wrought onto the battlefield.
Yeah, that's just mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's mean, but damn it.
Not only do they have low hit points, but if they're not fully armored, they are going to die very rapidly.
Well, why do they have to have low hit points? Wait. Go ahead, Conall.
Well, I mean, most wizards
can't see you, Matt.
Hypothetically, let's say you're in Jade's war campaign and you're a young gunslinger because you really like that model. I haven't played this character at all. And some son of a bitch magic user decided to cast slow on you. You're using firearms. You see the problem here? It's Matrix. Your bullets to you becomes the Matrix, and you just can walk around. Of course, you shoot the magic user first. Only you can stop the wizard from casting fireball.
Okay, Smokey. Yep. My problem was, why do the magic users always have to have low hit points? Why? Why can't your magic users, when they're done, studying, they go to the gym and beef up?
Well, they have to have low hit points.
Can you imagine what that would do to your players' minds if suddenly they see these big burly, Goliath-looking dudes from Necromunda, Fireball. You know,
Well-
their spell books are tattooed up their arms and on their pecs and whatnot, and they're just like, you know, oh, I'm going to do it. Okay, Mac, you're
What
here
is that?
first.
Harry Squatter?
The
The,
logic used
Oh, God, that's horrible.
in the setting that I created, because of the fact that magically enchanted armor is so common, almost every wizard has a robe that's functionally arrow proof. You need magically
So-
enchanted arrows to penetrate the defenses.
So you're doing the John Wick of wizards?
Well, it's one of those things that to me it's just like a logical extension. Is that you have people with powerful offensive magic. You also have people with powerful defensive magic. And if you're going into a combat scenario, you're going to want to have something to protect you from your enemies.
I go back to my original statement. Look long and hard into my icon. You see that? That's Mr. Rogers. What is he doing? Saying hi.
So we were talking about lore just a bit ago, and I just wanted to finish like the focus on the campaign and the setting's impact on campaign. So let's get into the campaign lore or the setting lore. And this kind of goes back to what you guys were saying about, you know, having too much lore can be a really bad thing or can be a detriment to the campaign or to the play of the character or players themselves. So I'm going to start with Shadow on this one. How do you balance providing enough detail about the setting without overwhelming your players with information?
Well, right off the bat, like I said before, I let them ask, you know, or inquire about the things they care about. I will describe the setting, but I'm not going to give anything away that they wouldn't be able to readily deduce on their own. I don't know what their individual deductive skills are, so I'm going to describe the setting and, you know, let them, you know, through whatever mode they want to go, depending on, you know, what kind of game we're playing, you know, ask questions, whether it be to the NPCs or, you know, if they have to ask me or if they want to, you know, blue book or text me, you know, while we're playing or something like that, you know, because as GMs, we're going to miss stuff, you know, and as opposed to let my players, you know, just, you know, start making stuff up, you know, well, I go over and I grab the axe off the wall. Well, I didn't tell you there's an axe on the wall, so there's no axe on the wall. But if they want to ask me questions about, you know, things that I might have missed, like what color is it? What does it smell like? You know, how big is it? Things like that. Just like with aspects of the society and the culture and the things like that, I'm going to try to lure them into asking the questions from the NPCs and find out what they care about, and then I can think about that while they're doing other stuff. You know, if they're asking, you know, why everybody wears a fez, you know, then I'll come up with, you know, some reason. I'll give them a short answer and then work it into things later if you know they care. But if they don't care, you know, I mentioned, you know, everybody's wearing a fez, even the women, and they're like, oh, okay, weird, don't care, move on. I don't have to do any more. You know, I'm not going to give them big long, you know, speeches on why everything is the way it is when they're going to forget half of it anyways. If they're interested, then it'll stick in their head and then it's important.
Unless you're me, then you note everything down almost as verbatim as you can.
And that's great when you.
I'm one of the weird ones.
Well, no, I mean, I'm looking at a book over here. It's The Legendary Lands of Arduin. It's a 900-page book. I mean, it's a phone book of all the stuff that you would want to know about a country. You'd be surprised how many people have not read the book, even though they own it. I'm one of the suckers who did read it. It was actually really great because it's system agnostic, so anybody could read it. But, you know, how much of it is going to get used? Every table is going to be different.
Fair enough. Conall, you sound like you want to add in on how to balance providing enough detail about the setting without overloading your players.
No, sorry, that was just my throat being an asshole.
Oh, okay. Just clearing your throat. Okay, that's fine.
I mean,
I'll ask it tomorrow then. I mean, if you want to jump in, go for it.
We kind of touched on that earlier, though. It's like you feed them details as those details naturally come up in the progression of the story. Like if a player asks about something, okay, describe it. But if they don't ask about it, maybe don't spend time to describe literally the entire town.
Fair enough.
Okay,
Um,
I'll jump on this one. First of all, Shadow.
You guys are awful.
First of all,
Well,
Shadow, fezzes are cool. I know
I
because
understand.
my doctor told me so.
Earl Herman told me so.
Yeah, Mr. Bobblehead himself said so. Anyways, going back to the topic at hand. It depends on the DM and on the player, in my opinion. I'm the guy who sat down and read all of Game of Thrones, Song of Fire, Song of Ice and Fire, which reads like a freaking textbook. I want to know the lore. I want to know about each house. I want to know about the knights of each house, the lords of each house. And it transfers over to the games I play. Jade with Jade's campaigns, I want to know who the main players are. Not saying my character knows who the main players are, but I have a general idea. So next time I sit down at his table and I know him playing his world, okay, this is 500 years in the future. This is the next day. It doesn't matter. Certain things don't change. Therefore, if I know the lore, I can make a character that's it's fun for me to play, and it's easy for my DM to work with. Instead of just saying, "Well, I'm going to play a fighter or a barbarian or whatever. I don't care. I just want to roll some dice and have a good time." No, don't be that player. Don't be that player. I get a lot of us have stressful jobs, but seriously, if you want to be a player, I'm not asking you to go get a college degree or a GPA. Just know about the world that you're playing in. How does it affect your character? What part of the world does your character affect? And things like that are important. It makes for a smoother game. So if he has 2 textbooks worth of literature for lore, so freaking be it. It's not going to kill you to sit down and read the footnotes every so often.
That's not true. I
Well,
literally watched the player character die. It was really hard telling his wife what happened.
As for me, when providing detail about the setting, I have recently started giving the 6 truths. The 6 truths are 6 things that are immutable facts. Like they are things that all characters throughout the world know and understand, as being 100% fact. Can I change them in the future? Yes, but if one of those 6 truths change, it is world shaking. It's almost world shattering when they change. Um, and those 6 truths can range over a variety of things, but they are typically really big, momentous things about the world. And if I can keep it to 6 things that all characters know about, where they're starting, the world they're in, um, I can impart a lot of information very quickly in a very limited fashion. So I'm not going to overload them. Now, do I have full-on tomes of lore for my game world? Yes, unfortunately, yes. I probably have some 200,000 words of lore built up over the course of 20 plus years of gaming. um would I ever bind all of them into one textbook? Maybe one day, when before I die. Maybe not, I don't know yet. But again, it's a game world that's been going for 20 plus years, so I write down and I take notes on things that have happened, things that the villains want to see accomplished, so on and so forth. But if you can s- strip out all of the nonsense that is unnecessary for players to just start a game and condense everything down to just 6 big truths, you can get the game going very quickly, and your players will understand what is in the world and what effect they can have on the world immediately.
Well, I mean, it's
So,
it's like that old 6 W's thing. Who, what, where, when, why, how.
mhm.
I mean, it's like that's
But
just like
it
the
goes deeper
basics
than
for
that.
describing it's of something, and it gives you a starting point, and then you move on from there.
And yes, Scott's games rarely ever. I don't think I've ever started in a tavern in Scott's games. They've always started either in a field, a city, or I don't know, at the gates of a city. So just working my way through
Yeah,
chat.
yeah, that's never gonna happen. Six Nations.
Uh, um, so now this is a question that one of you specifically wanted me to ask, and that is, how do you handle introducing new and unfamiliar settings to players, especially in settings where they have unique lore or unique magical systems? I believe it was Mar who wanted this question specifically in here. So Mar, how do you handle introducing new and unfamiliar settings to players, especially
Well
with unique lore or magic?
well, it's like I said earlier about, use of analogies, is that there's been so many different variations on fictional worlds over the years that you're probably not going to come up with something that is actually truly completely unheard of before. So, you know, just like it's kind of like this, except, different. It it's not, necessarily something people would think of as a novel and creative approach, but hey, the important part is getting results.
Sorry, looking at Mac's question here. What have you? Why are your players so paranoid? What have you put them through? I don't know.
The short
Send
answer or
a
the
group
long
of
answer?
I
send a group
mean,
of 2 or 3 gorillans at a party that's only 4th level.
No,
Things go
the
sideways in a hurry.
mirrors, mirrors,
Mirrors, yeah, mirrors.
mirrors.
No, I did that. I don't. Scott's done that once or twice, but I've done that a lot.
All true
So
adventures start at Richard's Under Main in Peoria. That is where you go to get your adventure going.
Um, so what about you, Shadow? How do you introduce your players to an unfamiliar setting, or even unique magic system or lore?
Use as many descriptive, phrases and uh, terms that you can that they may not be familiar with. Just try to describe it the best of your ability, and picture yourself there before you do so. Use your own imagination to get an idea of what it would feel like to be there. Yeah, sense of smell, as per Bruce Lombardo. The sights, the sounds. I like to focus on the weather sometimes, or trying to describe different plant life to really get it going, because we have yet to see that I'm aware of, other than maybe Dagobah, a world that uses plants unlike the ones we have. You know, for whatever reason, there's always pine trees on every planet. You know, uh, make some new ones. Start with some of the basic things. I talked about how I don't normally have like all the identical food animals that we're familiar with. Pigs, cows, sheep, chicken, that sort of thing. Because why would there be? It's a new world. Start with some of the most basic things, and right off the bat, you end up getting a world that's vastly different. Obviously, it's going to be pretty weird, but once you've described the tree once, then you can just call it by name and hope they get it. Maybe
mm,
draw them out. Draw some weird plants, some weird trees. Uh,
well,
different. Go ahead, Mar.
uh, an example of something that I saw in fiction that is in some way related to something from real life, but is something that has never actually been seen in real life, is a form of algae that uh, cr- has a turns itself into balloons as part of its growth process. Of course, it does this because it's on densely uh, forested planets that have a very, very jungly atmosphere. and this lets them float up into the air above the tree canopy.
Okay. You were saying, Shadow?
Yeah, start with sketching or drawing some things that are vastly different from Earth-like scenarios. There are lots of artwork places you can go, not just AI, but some of the old art books, the Terran Trade Federation books, and old book covers from like Weird Science and the other comic book things of the era. They would draw them, but they would never mention them. But you need to, as a GM, maybe the ground is pink, instead of, I mean, how many times have you seen a comic book cover and the ground was pink? It was like a very common thing. They would, it's not dirt, it's not, rust colored Mars, it's pink. Or maybe the ground is green, but there's no actual vegetation on it, but the dirt is green. Do little things like that. And right off the bat, they start, picturing everything differently, as they should. It shouldn't just be another version of medieval Europe. I mean, unless that's exactly what you're going for. But if you're going to make a world your own, why can't you, start from the ground up? The sand is blue. The skies are more orange than blue. Just weird things like that. Especially if you're running a sci-fi game.
Ooh.
I mean, there's no excuse not to do that.
Shadow, you just reminded me of the coolest description of a planet scape that I read in a sci-fi novel. It was, I forget the name of the planet itself, but it orbited a gas giant called Cat's Eye. And Cat's Eye, when the planet orbiting it was seen from the night's side up in the sky, would actually like have a faint inner glow to it, almost like a full moon, because it was a gas giant that actually was like warm enough that it would give off a certain amount of heat. Well, it's like the way that the story described Cat's Eye, those guys, like you're on a planet and there's this huge thing in the sky, not like the moon is visible on Earth, but something that takes up a big chunk of the sky.
More like a moon of the planet, then.
Well, yeah, it's like because it's a gas giant and an Earth-sized
Right.
body.
And for a fantasy world, I mean, how many times have we seen in a sci-fi game where like the moon is like massively huge, right? Or you can actually see the other planet even during the daytime with its rings, but you could still see it, but it's a sci-fi world. Well, if you're running a fantasy world, why not incorporate something crazy like that into it? More than one moon, like the world that I'm running right now. It's got 4 different moons, and they're going to actually play a big part in the world for various reasons. They'll probably never go there. They could, but why do we only get one moon and blue skies and all the same stuff, but yet it's a completely different world? Make it your own. If you've got a favorite color, throw it in there. Make your players hate that color by the time you're done.
This reminds me of how in MarHawkman, which isn't technically a TTRPG module, it's one of the Magic the Gathering settings. One of the things that makes MarHawkman different from Earth is the fact that the sky is illuminated by these giant glowing orbs of mana that no one knows why they exist, that they just do, and they float around in the sky almost like a moon orbiting the
I think you meant Mirrodin.
Yeah, hey, what's up, Kyle? I'm trying to see, buddy. What was
I'm
that?
not sure what the
part?
right way to pronounce that is.
How many here have played like Elder Scrolls or Morrowind or Oblivion? And there was that one. Okay, there was that one place that's like full of lava, but those giant mushrooms everywhere.
Oh, that's not Skyrim. That's the one before it.
The same planet, though. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Morrowind.
I was like, I need my brother because he's played all those games.
But you know what I'm talking about then, right? How weird was that looking? It looked insanely weird, but you know what? After a while, you get used to it, and it worked. It was one of the most unique settings I'd seen in a video game.
It
I've
kind
seen
of
some really weird visuals like that in games where there's these strange symbiotic relationships between lava flows and plant life that you won't see in real life.
Mhm.
well, because lava, the after the lava is done, what it does to the soil is enhance the soil. Therefore, things grow faster and normally healthier because of
So
it.
now
I
I know
mean,
we're still kind of onto the lore and how the world works and whatnot. What about the player aspect of things? What about if player characters, have a background story? Like, how do you incorporate a character or a player who's made a background for their character, if any, into your overall setting or narrative? Um, Con, I'm going to start with you on this one. Do you ever get players who make backgrounds for their characters?
yeah, I do. I kind
Okay.
of, me personally, I don't enjoy doing it. If I have a player that says, "Hey, I got a page, at least a page worth of a background. Do you mind reading it?" My answer will always be yes, because I can see how his background story. If he is the son of a merchant, then I'm like, cool. Here's the hook. Here's the hook. Um, yeah, I'll use background, people's background if they
Okay.
want to write one. Do I say, hey, to play my game, you need a background story for your character? No, because I, yeah, you all have heard my story, my opinion on them. So yeah, I will work it in, and sometimes after that game is done, that character, if the character survives or if he doesn't, he'll be brought up sometime else in another game as well. Such and such, such and such used to live here as his merchant family gets brought up or somehow it normally gets brought back up.
Okay. What about you, Shadow? Do you ever have players who have or want to create backgrounds for their characters, and
Oh
do you
yeah,
ever incorporate them into the setting?
it's funny. Raven McMinn, she's never played before any RPG, and she's already working on her without me saying anything. She's already got like the background. She's working on the background for both of her characters. Um, Guys, the players that do that, the players that want to write their backstory, you know, those are the players that are going to be there the longest. Those are the ones that are already invested before the first dice are rolled.
I
You know,
disagree with
uh,
that. Okay.
pay attention to those characters. They players. They want to play. They're ready to play. They're invested. They've already taken the time to take pen to paper. Something very few of us do anymore in our regular day to day lives. But they've taken, you know, away from the table. They've said, I'm going to write some stuff about my character and see if the GM will approve it. Take it apart bit by bit. First paragraph. Okay, is there something here I can use? Okay, maybe even get a copy of their background story and say, okay, I'm going to copy this, take a picture, whatever, and we'll work it in as we go. And if worst comes to worst, you can go, well, I've got it worked in, but you're not there yet, so just be patient, and then later on go back and check it out, and go, oh shit, I better do something and include this stuff. But that was a joke, folks. Pay attention and give them benefit of the doubt. They're going to pay attention to your backstories for the world and the environments, hopefully as much as you do theirs. And if you have that back and forth with each other, they're more likely to keep going and keep paying attention because they're seeing that you're paying attention. And eventually they're going to help you come up with plot hooks. Oh, they didn't want to go in the dungeon, well, let's check out their backstory.
Mm.
What can I pull from their backstory to get them to want to go in there? Oh, their cousin's trapped in the well, now they got to go in the dungeon. Something like that. Use it.
Also, one thing I feel they need to put in here is that when you're telling a player, like, "Oh, that backstory doesn't work," be specific. Like, don't just like say yes or no. Give them like which parts of it don't work. Like, okay, did they set their character as being a human man at arms from a town that's actually populated by elves? You know, stuff like that. It's just like explain to them how they need to fix it so that it works, and don't just tell them no.
I must be the rarity in this statement.
Not as rare as you might think. Because even Elle agrees with you, Connell, that the background for a character happens as you play the game, not before you play the game. Which again, there's nothing wrong with either direction. If you're the type who goes, "Hey, I want this character, and I kind of want to know where they came from, so I kind of have an idea of where they might be going or what their wants or goals in life are." If that's how you play, awesome, more power to you. Do it. If you're like, nope,
Yes,
it's
Matt,
just a
yes.
character, don't really care about them. Don't know where they came from, don't know where they're going, just here to roll dice or just here to experience the world and explore the world. Like that's also a great way to play too. Both work for differing types of players. Me, I'm the type who I would write 1, 2, maybe 3 pages of backstory, but I would intentionally leave these huge like underlined gap areas for a game master to fill in whatever they wanted. Um, or like, hey, here's all these characters in my character's backstory. Here's who they are, where they came from, what their hopes and dreams are. Take with this and do whatever you want with it for your game. If you want to tell me, hey, this doesn't work, fix this to incorporate this element, or hey, I like what the direction of this is going. But I would like to see it go in a slightly different direction. Work with your players, and players work with your game masters. Be flexible. If you're going to write a backstory, be flexible with your game master and your players to incorporate those elements, because that is going to tie certain players to your world so intrinsically. Like they are going to be immersed from day zero. That like they will just eat and breathe and sleep and live within that world. Their mind will escape to that world faster for those player types who have backgrounds that are incorporated into the game itself and the setting itself. Now, for store games or for one shots, I don't advise it. If you're running a bunch of one shots, as or even store games, as Elle has pointed out here, um, having backgrounds is just not as needed. Everything you need to know happens at the table as it unfolds. Or even published adventures. Like if all you're going to run is published adventures, you really don't need backgrounds for your characters. You don't need to know where the character comes from to know where they're going. The adventure
Well,
tells you where you're going.
actually, with
Good
that
point.
one,
Good point.
there's a different take on that. If you're going to do a pre-made scenario, it's that if you're playing a pre-made scenario with pre-made characters, you can have pre-made backstories that are intricately woven into the story because the players aren't making that up. You did.
Here's my thing, and it's here. I don't know if it's incredibly fair, and I'm not saying I disagree or agree with what Shadow said. I think people that want to play that don't make background stories for the characters more interesting about moving forwards than backwards, as I am with my characters, are just as invested as people who want to write as Scott said, at least a few page background story. It just really depends on that player's style. Not every style is going to work for every table, of course, but just to say, well, if you don't want to and I'm not saying this is what Shadow's pointing at, but just to say, I don't want you at my table because you refuse to spend, X amount of time to write a
Oh,
background.
no. I mean, you can't expect that, especially when you've got different levels of experience points. Let's say in the players, not every player's played the exact number of games for the exact number of hours. You've got different levels of play, and mastery. So, maybe, uh, you know, let the people who are new to it go, look, this guy's done this thing, they did their backstory, etc. That's going to help me out a lot, and let them know that, hey, I'm going to be using this stuff because they did the work. you know Give them time. They can always come up with stuff later, if it's within reason. It's like, well, hey, could I have had a twin brother and blah blah blah. Give them the benefit of the doubt, or at least consider it. But get them into the idea that you're going to use this stuff that they put on that sheet. It's going to benefit you for writing it, because now I can kind of tailor make the story to you, kind of like those books you used to be able to get, where if you send the money in, they'd put your kid's name in as the name of the character. Every time they mention the name of the character, it would be your kid's name, kind of thing. It's like that. Bring them in. At first they might not want to do it, but later on they're going to watch Timmy over here, who's getting all these cool things happening to him because they did the work.
Well, Scott Clark's comment here. He says 3 pages, and me thinking about how we did the character backstories in our Star Trek Adventures games, which, as a part of the life path system, they mandate you to at least think out a handful of basic details of your character. We would usually end up with 3 paragraphs.
Yeah, don't ask him to write a book, but something.
But
I wrote up
but this was basic details like, where was your character born? What environment did they grow up in? And why did they go to Starfleet Academy and stuff like that? Very simple things in their history, not a full in-depth biography, just basic direction of how their life went.
Well, here's what's Darian was my last. I mean, I've played a few characters since Darian, of course, but Darian will always be one of my favorite characters I've played in Jaide's campaign. And instead of writing a background story, I sat down and me and Jaide talked about what kind of character I want to play, how he would fit in his world. And I think, I'm not going to ask him his opinion on all the different characters I've played, because I've played quite a few while we've gamed together. But for him as a DM, I can't help but to think sitting down, having a conversation with me, what I'm expecting out of Darian, was more useful than giving him like 3 pages of paper that he can't read, because I can't fucking write all that well. Yeah, ADD is a bitch. But yeah, having a conversation with your DM is just important as writing something out, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I admit it. It does happen, not rarely.
And so, what do you think having a character backstory, in your opinion, Conall, having that character backstory, or even the conversation with your game master, what do you think that does for your immersion as a player in those games?
I think it helps a great deal. It gets me as a player more invested. Of course, if Scott said, "Hey, Conall, you want to jump in my game?" Of course, I'd write 3 pages worth of background, because I like him as a DM. I'm not saying I won't do it, and I'm not saying most players won't do it. But if you get a player, even if he's old hat, like some of us are, so I just don't do background stories, but he's a quality player, are you going to say no? Sorry, you're not at my table because you don't want to write a background story?
yes.
Every time I wrote in a background story for my characters, they last maybe 2 to 3 sessions. They die. If I don't write shit, they normally survive the entire game. So I don't know what it is, if it's just my weird luck on the situation, but I'm not going to overlook a good player because he's got a bad taste in his mouth for writing background stories for his character when he offers offers something great to the game.
Fair enough. What about you, Shadow? Do you ever have the moment where players are more immersed because of their background than the players who don't have any background whatsoever? Do you ever experience that?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I advocate for it, because it shows me that they want to be there. They're not just there for the camaraderie and the sitting around the table, hanging out with their friends. They're into the story. They want to be part of the story. They want to help put themselves as much into the story as possible. There's different levels of what do you call it? Brain fart right now. Some people, don't want to put that much into the game. Okay, they're not willing to invest as much as others. Some people do. The people that do, they're there for a completely different reason. That's to play this specific game, whatever it is at this time, because they want to be in a game. I find that the people that are less invested would be just as happy if we were going to the movies, going to a restaurant, that sort of thing, or just sitting around shooting the breeze. We want players that want to be in this game. We all have time that we can do the other things with our friends, and maybe that's what they're there for. If they're not really, investing in the game, then, maybe, invite them to other things and find out, when you're not playing the game, maybe see if they even care about talking about the game. I know with my old group of friends, if we went anywhere together, we were still talking about the game. We were, we're at dinner, we're talking about the game, making the waitresses like, what are these guys talking about kind of thing. You've all been there. Or if we're on the way to the movies or, going to the arcade or something like that, we would, it would come up. Maybe the people that are less invested, are really there for a completely different reason. Find out, and if they're uncomfortable or just downright lazy and don't want to do the work, then say, hey man, everybody else is really into the game. You don't seem to really be in that. Maybe this ain't for you.
Can I interject really quick, please?
Yeah, I'm done talking.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
For me, guys, it really helps when I can see you. When I can't see you, man,
it's fine. I just, what's going on.
Well, no, I mean you can do the hand wavy thing or
right.
Stuff like that, so we don't talk over each other.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to. I thought you paused, so I figured
I had to breathe.
No, you don't.
They do that from time to time.
It's a matter of choice. You gained with me before. You gained with me. Let's say you've gained with me. Jade has gained with me. So both of you guys can give an answer to this. If I say, "Hey, I'd love to be in a game with you. Are you running anything?" Are you going to say no to me after me being in a campaign with you or whatever setting because I don't want to write a background to my character?
No, I can find other excuses.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. I'll answer that.
As funny as that sounds, though, you should know when you're creating a campaign who would be ideal players for it or who you think are going to really get into this idea, not just because they just want to get into a game. They don't want to be alone or whatever. When you're making up a game, you should almost be thinking of players that like, man, I wish I could get so-and-so into this game. You know what I mean? There should be built-in.
Sorry.
There should be built-in like hooks, just like, hey, Frank, dude, I'm doing this thing that I know you like when it's in a game. So maybe this is a game you'd want to be in. How do you sell the game to a group of players? Think about who you want in it. Maybe put a little hook with a little cheese on it for them.
I guess that beggars the question, like, what elements of a setting do you believe contribute the most to immersion? Like, what parts of a setting or a game do you believe, in your own opinion, help to get players to really sink their teeth into what's happening in the game or even in the game world? Shadow, if you want to start with that.
Well, to be honest, like the game I've been going on and on about, the one I'm running right now, it's the game I've always wanted to run. It's also the game I would kill to be in. And that's what I do. I design a world and a setting and a game that, one, I'm not seeing anywhere else, and two, I wish I could be in. So at the very least, I'm getting half of what I want. You know what I mean? If someone was saying, hey, we're running a high seas nautical game where it's going to be months and months on a ship, hitting up all of the classical, traditional ocean going, tropes, sea monsters and mermaids and all that crap, I want in. Okay. Have any of you ever been in a game like that, where it's literally very little land, mostly on the water, occasional island hopping, that sort of thing. Lots of sea monsters, lots of kraken, all that cool shit. So you know what I'm talking about. It's not a common setting, but when you get there, it could be a blast. Maybe you want to run an Arabian Nights adventure,
or Waterworld.
Well, that's what I'm doing, but yeah,
I've never actually played that though. It's one of those things that sounds interesting because I played in games where we did stuff in the water, and one of my characters, because she's an Eskimo sorceress, she knows a bunch of spells that are useful for when you're out at sea, like water walk. So she can literally just like get out of the boat and walk to a different boat, but we didn't actually have the majority of our adventures doing that. That was just travel to a new adventure location.
Did that at all contribute to immersion for that player?
Well, I mean, this was Hyperborea, and just different parts of the way that the world of Hyperborea is put up. And yeah, it was something that helped with immersion because of the fact that the the person who made that character thought out the character's, in vague terms, life history, because this is a person from this village, etc., and a very simple backstory. But
thanks, Mac. Conall wanted to say something.
Okay. Yeah, Conall, what you got?
Going back on not so much lore but gender of the campaign setting game. I think
Genre,
it's a genre. I think it's interesting. We want to talk about pirates and stuff like that. And even in the sport, me and this guy's in when he can find the time and energy. When 300 came out, all of a sudden there was a whole group of people who want to play Spartans in the medieval reenactment. When Pirates of the Caribbean came out, a bunch of people wanted to be pirates. When the Viking show came out, everyone wanted to be a Viking. I think our gaming world is the same way. You want this guy over here wants to have a pirate campaign. Hey, I'm all aboard. I like a good pirate campaign. Let's do more ocean stuff than the town or island that has the women that's like maybe a once a month type visit scenario trip. Rest of the time we're out in the ocean. We're fighting other pirates. We are trying to get find a lost treasure of pick somebody. Whatever. That's to me that's a pirate campaign. That's the setting. That is what we're after. If we're doing a world war game, what he runs, and he does it well. The one I was in done well. I want it to drag.
I don't think I do it well, but
miserable. I want it to be dragging my face on cement again from point A to point
You said
B.
cement, right?
Yeah, cement, gravel.
Yeah.
Gravel.
No, I heard cement, not what you heard.
Just making sure, because
Well, gravel. I want it to be a drag. It's a war. I want it to feel like a war. So when these movies come out, and there's the reason why I bring up these movies. The movies, books, TV show drives to a certain degree what people want to play. Lord of the Rings. When Lord of the Rings came out, how many jokers out there want to be elves, dwarfs, halflings, aka hobbits, or whatever, because those books. Or I mean, even you up there have a story about you wanting to be one of the characters. So if these are
I wanted to be Strider.
if these are the type of games
right?
that you want people to get invested in, or the type of games that you want to play to get people invested in, why not make it a movie night? Hey, I'm thinking about doing a Pirates of the Caribbean type setting world. Not saying it has to be like the movie, but let's watch a bunch of old pirates, Cutthroat Island, movies like that. Just get you into it. I want to do a war movie, Fury, a bunch of World War II movies are out there. These things are not hard to come by. So if you want people to be invested really into it, give them a source material they can work with. That with me, it's movies and books. So if you want to get invested, have your players get invested it's not always a bad idea, even just to get to know your players. Hey, there's this a new pirate movie come out. I'm thinking about running. Let's go mine it for ideas, or whatever. Let's mine it for ideas, and you get to see who's invested.
So as far as me, like what I believe or what elements I believe in a setting really contribute the most to immersion, especially for the players, is when the game master can include something up. And I'm getting back to the backgrounds idea. So for those characters who have backgrounds, anytime the game master who has read the background for that character and understands the background of the character puts elements in the game that and tugs on those elements that is supposed to be about that character, that drags that player further into their character, at least in my opinion. I've had multiple campaigns over the course of the 25 years I've been doing this, and anytime someone gives me a background to work with, I will read through it 3, 4, 5 times in a year, just to refresh my memory of who they are, where they come from, and who are the players or who are the characters in their backstory that I can throw in the main game itself to really bring them to center stage. Um, my wife played a character, and the game didn't last long for various reasons, but the game was focused on it was a Wrath of the Righteous attempt, and she'd made this character who had like 8 or 9 connections in the city. A few of them really stood out, and I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna rename one of the villains from the module set to this villain that she has, this adversary she has. Later, Scott. Um, I'm gonna keep the love interest that she had in the game somewhere. They might become a squire or a follower at some point. I don't know. So I'm gonna go through that character background and pull all the resources I can to really bring that player into the game, and let them know that not only did I read what they put down on paper or typed onto a computer, not only did I read it, I understood it enough and wanted to make sure that they had a role in the world itself. That to me, I think, brings more immersion than almost anything else I can do as a game master. Now, for those characters or those players like Conall who don't want to write backstories, I find other things to bring them in, because I will have that conversation with those players, be like, okay, tell me about the character you want to play. Tell me what you want to accomplish with this character. What are their goals? What are some of the things that will uh, irritate them, get on their nerves, or things they want to protect? Like, tell me who this character is and why you are playing them. Give me something to work with, and I will take that character on a journey. And the more I can take that character on a journey, the more that player gets invested, especially if I can make that character center stage for any, length of time greater than, just once every like 20 minutes in a combat. If I can make that character, stand in center stage and really bring them out to shine for 20, 30 minutes at a table, over the course of a night, and really make it impactful for that character and that player, they're hooked. They're immersed. They want to come back every time because they want that chance to be that superhero. They want a chance to be that rock star character, and they want to put in the effort to play. At least that has been my experience. What about you, Mar? Like, do you have any elements about a setting that you believe contribute to the most for immersion with players?
Backstories of places. That is
Okay,
something that
places.
I always see in every game I have ever played. every place you go has a history, a backstory. And like, for example, that Star Trek Adventures module, like we go to a place that none of our characters has been to before, uh, because our shuttle actually crash landed there due to a cosmic storm sort of thing. Well, the location was a location that had a Federation research center there because of the fact that the planet was actually a reasonably lush Class M world, so sort of place you would find to be commonly suitable for habitation. It's just that people kept having issues like our shuttle crashing there, and they had a research station there trying to study the strange phenomena that kept occurring around this planet to understand it, and so on and so forth. And that was the history of the place before we got there, and something that we didn't learn all at once when we arrived and had to figure out because, well, we're stuck here now, and we kind of want to leave at some point.
Okay.
But, like, okay,
Um,
that was very specific to the plot of that one, but, like, basic stuff
sure.
like, is this a fishing village? How long has it been a fishing village? And that sort of thing will often come up in stories, and they make the world feel more alive because it's not just a square on a map. It becomes something more than a square on the map when you have, like, 2 or 3 lines of, uh, text about the, history of the place.
Okay. So the history of a place was what you're saying can help drive immersion. I never thought about it like that. Like I've got a lot of really deep historical things in my world, but I never really thought about the actual places. I mean, they have history, and I don't know. It's always been one of those things that my players have either. I've had one player who's been exceptionally interested in learning about the history of places, but then most of my other players don't really seem to care ever. Um, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is such and such place. Okay, what happened here?" And I don't mean like what happened here 10 years ago. I mean what happened here yesterday. Why is this place a bloody massacre?
Hmm.
Um,
The John Horde,
you
that's
know,
why.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Um,
that's one of those things where there's a distinction between the players using the information and appreciating the information and acting enthusiastic about it.
Well, the one person to ask you about all the information in your world really doesn't have much of a life, so it fills up the time. So,
I mean, sure. I've got like I said, I've got deep histories of my game world, like really, really pages deep history.
oh, I read the
But
original
again, most
binder.
of my players just aren't interested.
I read the original binder that you and the other guy originally put together several years ago. So no, I get it.
Jade, I'm one of
Yeah.
those guys. I have a really hard time of giving a rat's about a world unless the GM really pulls me in, and you know, I need something, not even like the quest, but why do I care about this town? And we're just going to another town in a couple of weeks. We'll be in another one and another one and another one. Um, I think we've got to find what each player is actually looking for. If I'll admit, like for example, if I'm in a town and a particular maiden is like giving me the eye or something like that might actually be like, well, really, okay, now you got my attention. What's the name of this town? I'm coming back here. As soon as we're done, we'll go talk to her. And as soon as we're done, I'm coming back. Stuff like that. Something that draws me in a personal level, or maybe some scoundrel walked off with one of my magic items, and the player's like, "Well, sucks to be you. We got to get going." I'm gonna be like, "I'm coming back here. I'm gonna get that back." Whatever it takes, something to make me actually care about the place. Otherwise, it's just going to be another town, another village, another bunch of NPCs that are, cardboard cutouts. Try to maybe, make it personal, even if it's on a, kind of a negative thing, but there's got to be something. Otherwise, it will just be another European looking medieval village that we're going to come across because the map is littered with them. How is it different?
Yeah, you definitely need to find a way to tie the story into the places the players are visiting in order to give them a reason to not just move on to follow the story.
No, I guess I guess that's where I differ, because I reuse a lot of the same cities throughout my game world, but not just my game world, but my campaign itself.
What do you mean reuse?
My so because I don't do a lot of long like long road campaigns, so to say. Like I don't do a lot of world tour campaigns. Um, my my party of adventurers will stay in one nation most of the time. They rarely branch out to other nations, maybe a neighboring nation for either a rescue mission or a diplomatic mission, whatever. But for the most part, they travel between 4, 5, maybe 8 major cities and the cities in between. So I might have a collection of like 100 cities that they might go visit on occasion, but they go to the capital, they do stuff at the capital, they get their mission to go to one of the sub capitals or one of the other major cities of the nation, and then stop at these little towns along the way. So when my players come back to the main city or on their way back to the main city, they'll stop back in at those towns they already visited, and I'll have time advance on those cities. Things have happened, the NPCs have, who met the characters will remember those characters. They will, and the player characters will be able to interact with those NPCs again, and they'll remember them. They'll have memory. The things they did in the town will still be there. Like anything they changed in the town is still going to be there. If they left the town in a really miserable state, the townsfolk are probably gonna run them out of town. They're gonna chase them away from town. If the PCs, I don't know, I'm gonna take something out of Star Trek, for example, where Data lifted a anvil off of somebody. If the player characters did something similar to that, where they saved like 2 or 3 NPCs of the town, that town's going to celebrate their return as heroes. And I think that also helps draw my players in if my world has memory of the things they have done and where they're going. I mean, I don't know, Colin. You played in my game. You traveled all over the place in at least one of my countries. Did I leave any lasting memories of some of those places or those
Oh
peoples?
yeah, I no longer trust satyrs or labyrinths. They're in the woods because fucking stealing satyrs,
That sounds
or
perfectly normal.
or dictators that don't exactly put the dick in the tater, but secretly, reelects himself every couple generations to make sure his military state keeps on plan. Yeah, you left. I'm not saying there's anything right with it. I mean, anything wrong with it. But yeah, there's been the city in the clouds, the wild hunt. There's been several different places. I can't think of them all off the top of my head right now, but yeah, there's enough. There's enough built-in memory there that next time you run something that's not in a bronze era, but in an era that I know, I'm going to have like, hey, I know where this is. And my character, I'll find a way to make my character. You know who makes a good character for your world? James. James made a great character for your
Yeah,
world. He was
yeah, he did.
he makes the note taker, the one who asks 101 questions, the one who is an expert in your world when you're not. Um, I miss James. I wish he was still around. I not that he's dead. I just wish he still lived in this area. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean.
you made a campaign that everything, a lot of the stuff was memorable. There's a few things are not so memorable, like what other characters did, but what everything my character just locked in here. Him killing that Marith, the
Yeah.
armed bitch with the
Oh,
guns. Oh yeah,
Merilith, yeah.
Type
Yeah.
type 5
Well,
demon.
she was actually, she wasn't just a Merilith. She was a Merilith, half Merilith, half Chain Devil. I don't ask me how it worked out. It was a creation that I'm like, yeah, it was this weird amalgamation of demon devil, and it was hell on chains.
It was
Meriliths
it royally messed up the party.
Meriliths have this strong resemblance to the Nagas, and I keep getting them mixed up with Nagas when
But-
trying to think of how to use them.
I mean, there's a number of areas in your world that will forever be stuck in my brain, and I think that's awesome. You know, I could say the same thing about Bruce and his campaign that he runs. I mean, there's a place on the map that no longer exists because somebody put a magic bag in a portable hole, and you know, I'm going to remember that for a while.
Well, I mean, that's actually something that came up a lot in our Hyperborea games. Is we would regularly go back to places we'd been to before. And,
And
it's like
so-
sometimes the people would
so
be happy
does
to
that-
see it, sometimes they wouldn't.
Does that help with your immersion then? If you travel back to the cities you've been to,
Well,
Mar?
I mean, it certainly gives you a reason to care about what you're doing as you're playing the game when you know that you're actually going to have to deal with that later on. It gives you a reason to want to remember uh, uh, the places you go to because when you know that you're going to come back, probably anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Me and another player, we're doing. We get these missions from the higher up. We leave town. We were giving a bag of holding. Yeah, everybody had their magic gear, but one of the main things that was given to us was an ambassador's bag, more or less. It was a gate. It was a gate that you could shove things in and go straight to the CEO, the person doing the order. Me and another player were kind of screwing around, messing around with the bag, and giving the guy crap. We got a hold of Clockwork Horse. We shoved him through the
One of the-
ambassador's bag, which is AKA gate portal, that popped on the guy's desk. Did that make me want to come back? Well, granted, I lived with him, so of course I came back the next week. But with that, but stuff like that, having fun at the DM's expense, but being playful about it is also, in my opinion, also something that will bring players back. Something they can of course they're going to rag on each other, but I don't think the DM always have to be the holy of holies. I think there has to be some playfulness between the DM and the players. This is not English 101 or History 101. You can't give the lecture or the professor shit, but you should be able, to a certain degree, give your DM a little bit of shit. He's going to give it right back to you, but you should, to a certain degree, be able to play back and forth. I think, this is also about having friendships, as Shadow said. But there's got to be some reason. The immersion is awesome. The theme is awesome. But if the person that's DM is kind of just dry, cold, stick in the wind, that's going to take, from my experience, that will drive players away. I know that's not exactly part of the question area that you had for this. I thought that was worth saying, though.
Sure. But Elle asks, is it the city or the people in it, as far as what is important? I want to say it's kind of both, because the people inhabit that city, and anytime the players go, hey, we haven't visited Hillsburg in a while, Hey, you remember what happened there? Oh yeah, I remember you lifted that anvil off that guy's leg. Maybe we should go back there sometime. Um, people will remember the places they've been, but they'll also remember the people. So I think it's actually both the place and the people that inhabit it that makes it immersive,
That beer
or at
maid.
least memorable.
Remember that beer maid 2 towns over? Yeah, can't wait to go back there. Hey, boss, do you have a mission that puts us in this town? No, damn it.
I mean, and I do remember some of my players actually asking, "Hey, when are we getting back to Bethel Garrison? The library there is just awesome. I'm able to research so many extra spells." Whereas the fighter's like, "Yeah, I have no reason to go back to Bethel Garrison. I mean, I've trained there enough. I don't have anything else to learn." But the caster's like, "No, no, no, I need to get back to that mage college." Um, you know, and I mean, sure, it could be for not necessarily role play reasons, but for power up or training reasons that they might go back to a place.
Here's a concept for you. Imagine if you had the Library of Alexander in one of your campaigns that the cleric and the wizards always want to get back to. Even the fighter, because
I
there's
mean,
certain books for techniques that he might not know.
yeah, I mean, and I might have something like the Library of Alexander in my Bronze Era game. I might have a storehouse of knowledge somewhere in the world, or my players might make a storehouse of knowledge in the world. I don't know what the Bronze Age for my world looks like. I've never played a game there. I've never run a game there. I don't have any lore about my Bronze Age. So I am really, really excited to start that game to see what my players make of that world, to see what my players are willing to do with, whatever I give them in that world. Because it's going to reshape the world going forward, and all the stories and all the campaigns I run in that game world going forward from that game.
Well, I know what I'm doing next Tuesday.
So, let's see here. I think we are pretty much out of time tonight. Does anybody have any closing remarks on the importance of setting? And should we do more of this specific topic or some of the subtopics we missed next week?
I'm all for continuing it. There was so much that you put into
Yeah.
this one. I don't know if you actually got to my questions. I vaguely remember them.
I did some of them, yeah.
But there's more. It was hard to choose. I just went for the ones I had the most humorous answer for. But
Okay.
yeah, guys, do the best you can with the setting. They've already bought into the rules. Okay. There's so much fun you guys can have if you make the world somewhat open and inviting place, as opposed to some of the settings like I mentioned, Ravenloft and Dark Sun. Those settings are brutal. That takes a special kind of player that really wants a real challenge. That's one of the reasons why I made the world that I made. I made it very simple and very open and ripe for the players to make it their own. Literally find an island, grab it and make it yours. Do whatever you want with it. Let's see where it goes, or maybe not. Maybe they will like the shipboard life, going from port to port, filthy bastards. But just make sure it's got something. One of the things I try to do, one of the most important things I think as a game master that I can do, is make them actually love a particular place that they call home,
or person.
Make it personal, make it their little slice of heaven, so to speak, and then drag them away from it so that they long to get back, like in The Hobbit. If they love that place, like a real place, they're going to dream about it. They're going to, I'm going to save up my money and do a bit of farming or whatever. If you've got that going on with them, then you've
Yes.
you've succeeded as a GM. You've made them love something that you created and give them a reason to love it. And trust me, it will pay off in spades.
Everything he just said, but still the love interest and burn the town. So I'll keep the party going.
I mean,
no. I actually, that's another thing that you mentioned. If you can actually make them fall for an NPC, another win in your book. You know what I mean? You've created that NPC out of nothingness, and suddenly they want to start a family and don't make it weird, But once again, you've succeeded. You've made them, want to give up adventuring. Of course, you're not going to let them, but you've made them want to, retire and build a family and make first level characters again, and let them do the same thing.
That is actually something that came up in our Hyperborea game, because we played the same campaign for several months. We had several characters die, but we also had several characters retire, and one of them did two of them retired and decided to go live with someone that they'd met on their adventure.
I go back to an original statement: kidnap them, burn the village. The Colson effect.
So, I hope that this has given you some ideas, and we'll go ahead and schedule a second appearance of the importance of setting for next week, because there is a lot we did not get to. We didn't really, I don't think, dive fully into immersion and the necessity of player buy-in. Nor did we really touch on the agency of the player to be able to make changes in a game world.
Yeah.
And there's also those times where the setting itself takes center stage away from the players, which I don't recommend doing, but it sometimes happens. Sometimes important events happen and the players need to react to them. So we'll try to discuss those things next week. And I hope you'll be here for that one. So I really enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to it next week. I hope everyone out there in chat also enjoyed the conversation. And if anything, I hope you guys are ready to talk about it next week. And thank you for spending your time with us. I really, really appreciate you. So if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to this channel and the channels linked in the video description below. And if you enjoyed our content, please make sure to hit that like button, because it really helps us know that we're doing a great job. Nope, that is the old one of those. My bad. I am failing tonight. Sorry. So have a good night, and we'll see you next time.